I read some of the stuff you said about you don't think that we gave enough attention to finding Dylan yesterday.
You should be doing backflips right now to take this polygraph test. You were the last person to have seen your son before he disappeared.
And please, I hope you didn't hurt him. I hope you did not hurt him.
In November 2012, 13-year-old Dylan Redwine disappeared while on a court-ordered Thanksgiving visit with his father, Mark Redwine, in Vallecito, Colorado. Months later, his remains would be discovered scattered in the mountains near his father's home. What happened to Dylan? Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born on February 6, 1999. He was a friendly and active boy who enjoyed spending time with his friends and family. He lived with his mother, Elaine Hall, formerly Elaine Redwine, in Colorado Springs, Colorado. His parents, Elaine and Mark Redwine, had divorced years earlier, and their relationship was bitter, leading to a long custody battle over Dylan and his older brother, Corey. By 2012, Elaine had primary custody of Dylan. His relationship with his father was strained. Dylan had told friends and family that he did not want to visit Mark for Thanksgiving that year and was uncomfortable being alone with him. However, a court order required Dylan to spend the holiday with his father at Mark's home in Vallecito, Colorado. The tension between Dylan and Mark had escalated the previous year when Dylan and Corey made a disturbing discovery. In 2011, while using their father's computer, they found explicit photos of Mark wearing women's lingerie and eating feces from a diaper. The images disgusted and disturbed them. Dylan shared the photos with friends and was humiliated by what he had seen. In the months leading up to the Thanksgiving visit, he avoided contact with Mark and was described as reluctant to see him again. Despite this, Dylan boarded a flight from Denver to Durango on November 18, 2012. Upon arrival, he texted his mother to confirm that Mark had picked him up, adding a scowling emoji to express his displeasure. Surveillance footage later showed them at Walmart and McDonald's before heading to Mark's house on County Road 500, north of Vallecito Reservoir. That night, Dylan asked Mark if he could sleep over at a friend's house, but Mark refused. Dylan was forced to stay at his father's home. By the next day, Dylan was missing. On the evening of November 18, 2012, 13-year-old Dylan Redwine arrived at his father's home in Vallecito, Colorado, for a court-ordered Thanksgiving visit. He had planned to meet his friend, Ryan Nava, at 6:30 a.m. the next morning in Bayfield, but he would never show up. That night, Dylan was actively texting friends, making plans for his visit. At 9:37 p.m., his phone activity suddenly stopped, which was highly unusual for someone constantly connected through texting, gaming, and social media. The next morning, Ryan expected Dylan to arrive as planned. When he didn't, Ryan sent him a message at 6:46 a.m. asking, "Where are you?" but received no response. By midday, concern turned to alarm as Dylan's friends repeatedly tried to contact him, but his phone remained silent. Mark later told police that he woke up around 7:30 a.m. and saw Dylan asleep on the couch watching Nickelodeon. He said he left shortly after to run errands in Durango, about 20 miles away, and assumed Dylan would wake up and meet his friends, so he went to nap. Receipts confirmed that Mark was in Durango between 8 a.m. and noon, but when he returned home, he claimed Dylan was gone. At first, he said he wasn't concerned, believing Dylan had simply walked to meet his friends. As the afternoon passed with no sign of Dylan, Mark's concern grew. At 4:30 p.m., Mark called Elaine Hall, Dylan's mother, to ask if she had heard from him. Immediately sensing something was wrong, Elaine pressed him for details. When she asked where he had looked, Mark admitted he hadn't actually searched for Dylan. He had only called a few of his son's friends. Frustrated and alarmed, Elaine urged him to start searching immediately. By 6 p.m., after 11 hours had passed, Mark finally contacted police and reported Dylan missing. That evening, La Plata County Sheriff's deputies arrived at Mark's house. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle, but Dylan's backpack, cell phone, and iPod were missing, suggesting he had either taken them or someone had removed them. At first, authorities considered the possibility that Dylan ran away, but the evidence did not support this theory. He had never run away before, was excited about seeing his friends, and most concerning, his phone activity had completely stopped the night before, something entirely out of character for him. By that night, a full-scale search for Dylan was organized. Sheriff's deputies, search and rescue teams, and volunteers combed the dense forests and shoreline around Mark's remote home near Vallecito Reservoir. The mountain conditions and low temperature made law enforcement worry that if Dylan was lost, he wouldn't survive long. Authorities launched a search operation using helicopters with infrared cameras, ATVs, horses, and drones to scan difficult-to-reach areas. Hundreds of volunteers joined the effort, determined to find Dylan. On November 21, 2012, investigators brought in cadaver dogs, trained to detect human remains. The dogs alerted near the dam of Vallecito Lake, suggesting the possible presence of a body. For the next 3 days, dive teams and sonar-equipped boats searched the water, but no remains were found. With no evidence in the lake, search teams shifted their focus back to the mountains and forests surrounding Mark's home. As the investigation progressed, several inconsistencies in Mark's story emerged. A neighbor reported seeing Mark's porch light on at 2 a.m., but by sunrise, it was off. Mark claimed he had been asleep all night, but if that were true, why had the light been on? Another element was Dylan's phone silence. His last known activity was at 9:37 p.m. on November 18th, after which there were no calls, texts, or social media activity. Investigators suspected his phone had either been shut off manually or destroyed. Mark's behavior also raised concerns. Despite Dylan being missing, he made no real effort to search for his son. He never drove around looking for him, didn't check places Dylan might have gone, and seemed indifferent while law enforcement and volunteers searched. He insisted Dylan had probably run off and would return on his own.
I do believe Mark has something to do with Dylan's disappearance. I do believe he knows more. He's done everything other than look for Dylan. And that's what makes me suspicious.
I think Mark has something to do with it. I think he's either got him hidden out or, done something and disposed. I strongly think that he's involved.
Why?
He hasn't done a single thing since Dylan has been gone.
Why do you say that? What has he not done?
He hasn't been to any of the benefits. He wasn't there for Dylan's birthday vigil. He hasn't helped at all with the Find Missing Dylan Redwine Fund.
And that's offensive to you?
Very.
With no leads and no sign of Dylan, authorities expanded the search radius. Between November 20th, 24, 2012, teams covered hundreds of miles, stretching from Vallecito Lake to Middle Mountain. They went door to door, distributed flyers, and set up roadblocks, questioning drivers in case anyone had seen Dylan. The effort extended deep into the Rocky Mountains, where Mark had frequently camped and hiked. By the end of November, authorities no longer believed Dylan had wandered off. His sudden phone silence, missing belongings, and Mark's evasive behavior suggested something far more sinister. What started as a missing persons case was now a criminal investigation. For months, Dylan's whereabouts remained unknown. The community held vigils in his honor, hoping for a miracle. But in June 2013, 7 months after Dylan's disappearance, he would be found. 7 months after Dylan disappeared, searchers made a grim discovery. On June 27, 2013, in a remote area of Middle Mountain, about 8 miles from Mark Redwine's house, they found partial human remains. The bones were later confirmed to belong to Dylan Redwine. Along with the remains, searchers found scraps of clothing scattered near a dirt road used by ATVs. The area was rugged and hard to reach, far from where Dylan could have gone on his own. Wildlife experts determined that animals did not move the remains there, meaning someone placed them on purpose. Investigators were left with a big problem. Dylan's skull was missing. Without it, they could not determine how he had died. The coroner ruled the cause of death undetermined, though investigators strongly suspected foul play. For over 2 years, the case remained unsolved. Then, on November 1st, 2015, hikers in Middle Mountain found a human skull about 1.5 miles from where Dylan's other remains had been discovered. Forensic experts confirmed it was Dylan's. The skull showed 2 sharp cuts and a large fracture, consistent with a violent blow to the head. The injuries happened before or shortly after death, ruling out an accident or animal attack. Investigators also believed the skull had been moved, likely to hide evidence. This discovery confirmed what had long been suspected. Dylan Redwine was murdered. From the start, detectives suspected Mark Redwine. While they did not immediately name him as a suspect, they closely examined his behavior, statements, and alibi. Over time, his story had inconsistencies, and forensic evidence only made him look worse.
We were inseparable. I mean, anywhere I was, he was right there beside me. You know, he would come to me before he would go to his mom. You know, I think in many ways that was part of the problems that developed in our relationship, was because while she was out earning a career, it was very difficult for her to lose sight of the fact that she wasn't there bonding with Dylan the way I was. And I think that that was a huge problem for her. And I think that that has been a problem for her for a long time now.
I have to ask you this question. Did you have anything whatsoever to do with Dylan's disappearance?
Absolutely not. I would never do anything to harm that boy. I know they're looking at me as being involved in some kind of kidnapping scheme, which is one of the reasons why I want them to look closely at me. Because the more that they look at me, the more they're going to realize that I have nothing to do with this. There's no possible way I would ever do anything to cause harm or misery to my son.
When I got home, the TV was on, and it was on to one of the Nickelodeon channels that he's always watching.
A texter? It doesn't make sense that he stopped texting that night. If Dylan was just going out to see his friends that day, he wouldn't have taken all of his belongings. None of his belongings have been found. Mark talks about his backpack and a fishing pole. Dylan is not a big fisher person. He didn't even know how to thread his own line. Dylan was not watching Nickelodeon. Dylan watched MTV. He doesn't know his kid well enough to make up a good lie. I believe Mark was the last person to see Dylan.
Dylan didn't really look up to Mark. They had a relationship, but it was never what Dylan had wanted. It was always what Mark had wanted, which was always to be on the road. Really? Never there.
Why do you call your father Mark instead of Dad or
Because he's not a father to me. A father is someone who cares for their kids and, you know, would do anything for them. Be a role model, someone to look up to.
I believe that you're being very disrespectful, and I believe that everything that's coming out of your mouth is perpetuated by your mother.
I have my own mouth. I can say my own words.
Then use it.
I am at you. I don't like you. I hate you, and you have been nothing of a father since the last 10 years.
Police searched Mark's home multiple times looking for any sign of Dylan. In August 2013, they brought in cadaver dogs, trained to detect the scent of human remains. The dogs alerted in several locations, including the living room, washing machine, and Mark's truck. This suggested that a dead body had been inside those places. Forensic teams tested the house further and found traces of Dylan's blood in several areas. Using luminol, a chemical that detects hidden blood, they found it on the couch, floor, coffee table, and under a rug. Since Mark remodeled his home in 2011, Dylan had no reason to have bled there unless something violent had happened. As police dug deeper, disturbing information about Mark came to light. His ex-wife, Betsy Horvath, told investigators that years before Dylan's disappearance, Mark had once casually mentioned how to hide a body, saying, "If I ever had to get rid of a body, I'd leave it in the mountains." At the time, it seemed like an odd comment. But now, with Dylan's remains found exactly where Mark once said he would hide a body, it felt like a confession. That's not the only confession he seems to have made. Watch out.
Well, when I got home and he wasn't here, I didn't think much of it at the time. Because it's not unlike him to go wandering off and, he'll walk down to the river across the street, or, you know, he might go up into the campground where he can be next to the river up there. They just notify the local authorities to keep an eye out for him, make contact with him, so somebody can bang him in the head and say, hey, your dad's trying to get a hold of you, your friends are trying to get a hold of you, you need to communicate.
Then another key detail surfaced. In April 2013, months before Dylan's remains were found, a witness saw Mark driving alone on Middle Mountain Road, the exact area where Dylan's bones would later be discovered. This was a remote, hard-to-reach location that few people traveled to, especially in the winter. Why was Mark there? After years of investigation and growing forensic evidence, law enforcement finally made their move against Mark Redwine. On July 20th, 2017, authorities tracked him down in Bellingham, Washington, where he ran away and had been living and working as a long-haul truck driver.
There's a passenger, Just keep your hands up, buddy. Just keep your hands up.
Volleyball, watch the cab.
I got the cab. Around me, go around back. Yep. Just keep your hands up.
Don't move, bud, okay? I'm good. Do not move. I'm good. Drop a cigarette.
He was arrested without incident and charged with second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. Following his arrest, Mark was extradited to Colorado, where he was held in custody as he awaited trial. His trial, however, would not come quickly. It was delayed multiple times due to a series of legal motions, Mark changing defense attorneys, and eventually the COVID-19 pandemic. After nearly 4 years of postponements, the case finally went before a jury in June 2021 in Durango, Colorado. During the trial, prosecutors laid out their case, arguing that Mark killed Dylan in a fit of rage after Dylan confronted him about the explicit photos, showing them to the jury. They described how the relationship between father and son had become strained ever since Dylan and his brother Corey had discovered the disturbing images on their father's computer. Prosecutors revealed that Corey had texted the photos to Mark in August 2012, months before Dylan's disappearance. This exchange had enraged Mark, leading to heated arguments between him and his sons. The prosecution suggested that Dylan's knowledge of these photos, whether he directly confronted his father about them or not, had triggered Mark's violent outburst on the night of November 18, 2012. On November 18, 2012, while driving from the airport to his home, Mark Redwine reportedly criticized Dylan's mother and brother, calling them a bad influence. During the ride, Dylan texted his brother, Corey, asking for the explicit photos of their father. In the message, Dylan wrote, "Hey, send me those poop pics of Papa because he gave me a speech about you guys being a bad example, and I want to show him who he really is." This exchange suggested that Dylan was frustrated with Mark and possibly planning to confront him about the photos that evening. Dylan's mother, Elaine Hall, testified about her son's reluctance to visit Mark for Thanksgiving, recalling how he had been dreading the trip and had made plans to spend as little time as possible with his father. One of the most emotional moments of the trial came when Corey Redwine took the stand. He recounted how discovering their father's disturbing photos had permanently changed the way he and Dylan saw Mark. He told the jury that Dylan had even talked about using the photos against their father, proving that this secret had become a major source of tension between them.
And was there a point in time when Dylan used the defendant's computer?
Yes.
Did he find something on the computer?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what he found?
He found pictures of Mark dressed in women's clothing, wearing a diaper, taking selfies of him wearing the clothing, wearing the diaper, eating the feces that was in the diaper, and just that's pretty much it.
Mark did not testify in his own defense. His legal team attempted to suggest that Dylan had either run away and died due to exposure or had been attacked by a wild animal, but the forensic evidence made these claims impossible to believe. After a 5-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than 5 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all charges. On July 16, 2021, nearly 9 years after Dylan's death, Mark Redwine was officially convicted of second-degree murder and child abuse, resulting in death. 3 months later, on October 8, 2021, Mark stood before the court for sentencing. The judge, expressing the severity of Mark's actions and his complete lack of remorse, imposed the maximum sentence allowed by law, 48 years in prison. Following his conviction, Mark filed an appeal, arguing that the introduction of the explicit photos during trial unfairly biased the jury. However, legal experts consider it unlikely that an appeals court will overturn the verdict, given the strength of the forensic and circumstantial evidence presented against him. Dylan's family has continued to honor his memory. In Bayfield, Colorado, a memorial bench has been placed in his name, serving as a quiet tribute to his life. Each year on February 6th, his birthday, and on November 19th, the anniversary of his disappearance, those who knew him gather to remember him. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your opinion about the case, and I will see you next time. Stay safe.